Welcome back to Understanding VC. I'm your host Rahul. Today, my guest is Alex Felix. Alex is a chief investment officer and managing partner at CoinFund. CoinFund, founded in 2015 and headquartered in New York City and Miami, is a crypto-native investment firm and registered investment advisor. Prior to CoinFund, Alex was in private equity and worked at American Capital, Bank of America, RBS, and Guggenheim Partners. Now let's talk to him. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Rahul. How are you?
I'm good. It's good night here, though. It's at 10 p.m. in Singapore.
It's an international podcast. It's great to be on, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I was reading that you were an NCAA national ski champion back in 2007. So what does that mean? This is like you're the best in the US at a college level?
Yes. So kind of predating my existing career, I was very focused on skiing growing up. It became something I did on nights and weekends while my dad was in architecture school and my mom was looking for an activity for me to pursue, and turned into a passion of mine, but also a professional ambition to be the best in the world at something. And that was athletics, through my high school and college careers. I raced for Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. We had one of the best ski teams in the country. And in 2007, I guess my junior year, where I was one of the co-captains, we managed to win the national championship, Division I. For the college, it's a mix of our results on the alpine side and the cross-country side. And, individually, we all did extremely well and were able to kind of win that notoriety. Went down to the White House, got to spend some time with the president and meet a bunch of the other NCAA champions that year. So it was an exceptional kind of cap on my skiing career. Unfortunately, I had a bunch of knee surgeries as well, and had to shift my ambitions post-college to tackling something professionally.
So was it personal injuries the reason why you didn't do it professionally, or were there any other reason?
I mean, look, it's very hard to be the best in the world at something. I think I was on that track. I definitely think injury set me back. I had 3 knee surgeries, kind of season ending within, the last 4 of 6 years of my skiing career. So it was constantly, trying to figure out how to come back, trying to figure out how to be mentally stronger despite being physically set back, and, continuing to challenge myself to, focus on the individual sport that benefits from training with some of the best in the world, but also, on race day, you're out there on your own and you have to many different adversities, which has led me to understand the challenges of both business as well as the people you want to be training with and working with to build something exceptional over time.
So since graduation, you've throughout been in finance. Did you have any interest in finance?
Growing up, I was interested in many different things, from art to economics. I probably traded, stocks and options and commodities, much earlier than many. My sort of curiosity is something that's always driven me, thinking about the interconnectedness of different disciplines and sort of how they inform each other. So while a lot of my formal training was more in liberal arts as well as some of the hard sciences, my interest in finance was largely about looking at how things connect, how money moves around the world and how businesses are built and how they become very big. What is the ambition behind entrepreneurs? What is the ways that they develop, moats and differentiation? How do they, sort of defend themselves against all the threats out there? And how do they overcome a bunch of challenges and diversity to lead a team and build something great? So most of my formal training was not in entrepreneurship, but the culmination of the many different things that I learned, over my career, and I was a major in economics and earth sciences, led me to want to understand some of those challenges that make both the physical world and now the digital world tick.
Yeah. So you spent a number of years in private equity before, doing venture. So how is private equity different when compared to venture?
The world of high finance is somewhat more formulaic at this point. There are, businesses with a lot of metrics. There's a lot of, well-reasoned analogs and case studies and similarities that you can draw on in terms of, how a company's doing. And the biggest difference is, venture and early stage is much immature in understanding its end markets. who its customers are, how much value they can provide to them, and how to do so in a way that embeds them as a long-term sticky service provider to those customers. So nothing is entirely different, especially the verticals that I spent a lot of time with in private equity, which were largely in the tech sectors, things like SaaS, fintech, payments, and others. And what really is different is the way by which the company's end markets are unexplored, and in fact, sometimes the total addressable markets or the market sizes have either yet to be created or are undefined. But that's where the creativity comes in to think about what early traction looks like. What are the signs of developer interest? What are the signs that customers or consumers might be interested in these products or services? And to try to develop an edge in that particular area at the nexus of the size of the market, who the team is, and anticipating the potential traction or business that they could unlock.
Yeah. So even if you have an edge in venture, you still want to have a personal brand so that, you can attract smart entrepreneurs, right? Am I wrong to say that? Because I don't find a lot of private equity guys doing a lot of personal branding or a lot of these media engagements, but you see a lot of venture capitalists do this. Why is that?
I think it's a great point. And when I moved from private equity to starting the venture fund and running CoinFund, one of the biggest mental blocks for me to overcome was that you don't go out there and be very self-promotional. In private equity especially, you let the brand do the talking, you let the results speak for you, and you kind of benefit from your limited partners or your founders that you're backing being out there and talking up your potential to their peers, who ultimately might be your next customers on the founder side. The biggest difference, though, is in private equity, people generally react to top dollar, like how much is someone willing to pay for my company? Because a lot of, if it is a founder owned and operated company, they're looking at it as either a partial or a full exit. You're selling, usually over 50% of your company, and that's usually triggering a change of control. And you're going to have a new board and potentially a new strategy and even new leadership moving forward. So a lot of entrepreneurs that have, are not C-suite executives that have come in to kind of, scale companies, look at that as what they call an exit. So similar to an acqui-hire or similar to an IPO, things change dramatically after that, for better and sometimes, for worse, for some of the entrepreneurs who are used to having the reins and really like taking things from 0 to 1. In venture, you're still on that path where, your VC is aligned with you, really trying to support you in any way possible, but not, overly control the business and the vision and the execution of what you can create. So it's two very different stages. And I think one of them requires, more personal brand development, or, venture firms are trying to develop a voice out there with entrepreneurs so they can attract them, get their attention, focus them on what they're going to be, building and really make sure they don't miss things in their thesis areas that could be exceptionally important to make sure they get a look at. A venture deal can get done in 2 weeks or 2 months, or may take longer. Private equity deals take a long time. They generally have a well-rounded outreach process for hundreds of firms that have similar remits. And they're putting all those firms, head to head for management's time, really running formal processes. I mean, in venture, it's very different. It's chaotic. It's, part luck, part happenstance, part, having a prepared mind for finding the things that you want to spend time on as early as possible so that you can develop conviction and get to an investment in a reasonable amount of time, because founders are moving quickly and they're looking for partners who can do the same.
Yeah. So I would like to know more about CoinFund, and you mentioned that you are a crypto native investment firm. What does that mean?
Yeah, CoinFund is a leading crypto and Web3 focused investment platform. So we launched in 2015, one of the earliest funds out there. And we built a world-class team focused on backing and supporting very ambitious entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. Our recent, $300 million venture fund speaks to that. We're actively out there, supporting founders through this crypto winter. But what does crypto native mean? So crypto native is really a different way of thinking and approaching the business opportunity and the potential of crypto, and having a lot of context into what's worked and what hasn't over the years. It's a nascent asset class, outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Very few of these networks have been around more than 5 or 6 years. So it is just developing, and we're at the forefront of that development. And being crypto native really means learning alongside your founders, alongside the builders out there, such that you can well adjusted and oriented on what the long-term vision of all these different businesses is hoping to achieve. And that long-term vision is a massive overhaul to the existing Web 2 internet stack to include primitives like finance and payments and validation and decentralization, securing your own data, really putting consumers and companies in control of their destiny, not relying on Web 2 platforms, not being beholden to their APIs and their rule changes, but focused on limiting the externalities that your business faces, but also, building on some, very immature and nascent infrastructure, which are these blockchains and blockchain tools that are out there today. So to us, crypto native is a mix of, being a node. It's a mix of having the right network. It's a mix of being able to find experts and domain experts in certain niche areas. It's about having, learned what's worked and what hasn't, throughout the history of crypto's nascent life. And it's about, thinking about the business models and the approaches very differently than Web 2.
Yeah. And how did you guys get started? I know you guys got started in 2015, and also during a crypto winter. So
we've been through 3 crypto winters in our nascent 8 or 9 year history here. I think that pales in comparison to what the general tech economy has been through over the same time frame, and we're really just seeing our first major reset in a decade. So it's built a lot of conviction in ourselves that we know how to handle the volatility, the ups and downs of early stage development, and can pass that information along to our entrepreneurs. But CoinFund started interestingly as one of the first communities focused on crypto and Web3. Prior to Telegram, Slack, the media, Twitter, all the places that you've come to learn about crypto and Web3 today, CoinFund was actually one of the earliest communities focused on accelerating that dynamic. We had people from all over the world, from many different domains and expertise in what we called the CoinFund Slack prior to launching the actual business. And that's actually how I met Jake, my co-founder, and how I got to know him in the New York community, as well as many other luminaries in the crypto space that have now gone on to build big companies. We turned the Slack group into a big business.
Yeah. So I've spoken to a couple of your portfolio founders, and when I asked them on what do you think about CoinFund, there are 2 things that are consistent. One is a lot of founders, I think, trust you guys. So how do you build trust? I mean, it's essential for any sort of financing business, but
we build trust through building deep connections with our founders. We really want to be on their team. We understand and help them understand that the process around the financing is the only time, we will be negotiating to try and align our interests with them. And once we've settled on the financing, we're on the team and the tables turn. We, really want to be, one of the first calls that an entrepreneur can make in good times and bad times. And most importantly, be present for big decisions as they come along, and be prepared, having understood, sort of the company's motivations, some of the challenges or successes they've had in the past, to help influence, those key moments in a founder's journey that can make all the difference. And we bring a lot of value-added services to the table that focus on that intersection of being crypto native, as well as understanding how to bootstrap and scale companies. We have things like active network participation, where we build technology on top of our portfolio companies to help accelerate or bootstrap their adoption. We have in-house talent, in-house marketing, in-house portfolio growth that synergizes and provides our founders, connectivity amongst each other to accelerate their businesses and learn from each other. Crypto is a big idea, but it's being built over a long time frame. And there's what's known as composability, which means that almost every project has some key dependencies or key risks or key roadmap blockers that it can't control. Many of them in the early days was, I'm building on Ethereum. Will Ethereum survive? For some now, it's focusing on the intersection of regulatory and crypto. For some, it's also focused on safe adoption. How do I limit my mistakes in impairing my end users and creating those big binary risks to my business, despite how hard I'm working.
Yeah. This is quite different in terms of like the support structure that generally VC firms have, right? So how do you go about hiring and designing such a support system for like crypto? Is it any different? So I mean, the platform structure is a common theme amongst large AUM VC funds, where they have in-house teams for helping with hiring, portfolio, like corporate development and other things.
That's a great question, and one of the big differentiators here is we've invested a lot in creating this platform for early stage. Many of those other platforms you discuss focus on many different stages of investing, but are much larger. And we think it's a prerequisite for crypto because there's an interdisciplinary space where you're changing the business model. You're moving from SaaS to pay as you go. You're, focused on using tokens instead of dollars as how to bootstrap your end user base or your prospective early B2B opportunities. How do you value, sort of your token, your tokens in a way that drives efficiency in that, growth plan? We are building businesses that are open source. This is not being afraid to lean in to other people learning about what you're doing early and actually having an online presence where you're talking about what many people would consider their either trade secrets or proprietary IP. But the potential of some of these layers and some of these networks is global adoption. Very few businesses, actually have global ambitions these days in sort of the geopolitical climate as well as the regulatory environment, and crypto differentiates there. These systems could be adopted globally very quickly. We see pockets around the world that are building or supporting with nodes and other infrastructure, many of these critical layers, and that creates open competition. So everything you're doing for your business is 100% focused on the end user and the consumer-oriented view of what you're trying to build. Because if you're not going to make it. If you're not product obsessed, if you're not focused on improving the business model, to a degree that you can be adopted and, build that network effect and build that moat, and you're too greedy in any of these one areas, you won't be in business as a global platform. And so I think that the big benefit of that is once that does happen, it's very hard to compete against because you've been fully transparent in all those important areas. But our team, really leans into that multidisciplinary requirement and thinks about the experience of an operator, the experience of a technologist, the experience of a professional investor. And we want to blend those different skill sets into our team so that we can approach crypto professionally and understand both the guts of a blockchain as well as the ambitions to build a big business and commercialize its potential. Those are two hard problems. And a lot of the way we think about our team is having that either specialization or domain expertise in certain areas, but also being willing to learn. As I mentioned before, the space is early, and we actually see ourselves building our company and our platform, CoinFund, alongside every other entrepreneur out there. And that allows us to deliver a level of credibility about what it takes to build in this space. What are the challenges you're going to face? How do you overcome them? And we have acute, information and connectivity and domain expertise in those areas, which drives a lot of confidence in potential founders we partner with.
Yeah. And I mean, how do you take on a challenge of composability? Can we just go back to that? That's been playing in my head.
It's a challenge in the sense that the non-consensus view of crypto is understanding that no big corporation, no one has really laid out a 10-year roadmap for what should be built and in what order it should be built. So a lot of projects are more open to relationships, kind of jamming on products, really working with other companies in the space in a more synergistic way than you might see in Web 2, because there are problems we need to tackle or preview for the infrastructure developers as early as possible, so we don't wind up hitting major timing roadblocks. And what does that look like in reality? Well, from an investment perspective, we tend to think about how companies can future-proof themselves, or at least limit the number of dependencies they have on other platforms or other technologies, such that they're nimble. Like if we're making a bet on a team and their founders, we want to know that they can overcome some of those challenges or those, composability dependencies if things change, or that the end state might look like being agnostic to, any single platform or any single, potential tech roadmap. So if you're building a messaging app, where do you want to deploy, whose roadmap might you be signing up for in terms of how you're, using underlying infrastructure, but you're also trying to focus on the consumer end market, and that takes all your attention. So you want to build in a way that doesn't create tech debt, that allows you to be, sort of nimble in that approach, and to think through just the risk you have, not necessarily be able to mitigate it all out of the gate, but just to be conscious of those decisions and those, changes in your roadmap that might lead to technology obsolescence, that might lead to, difference in opinion, amongst, sort of your developers that are building for you, and just get ahead of that. So it's just a very different development environment than I had seen in Web 2 prior.
Yeah. I guess you also have to double down on the community aspect, since everybody has to work together and you become the facilitator, I guess, one of the many facilitators.
It's a great point, because many of the successful blockchains today have figured out how to leverage the community in an open source movement to drive forward their project and ambitions. At the end of the day, we believe that if you're wholeheartedly relying on your employees and your employees only, we kind of call this, sort of the people in your four walls, to make your protocol successful in the long term. I don't think that works. For a data analytics project that's trying to cover and surface, blockchain data, there's a new blockchain every day, every week, every month. There's a new, sort of system that would need to be integrated, and you'd have to build connectivity to it. Those are things that if you can't solve and get buy-in from many different, sources to help you solve in a more scalable way, it just may not work. So we do look for, early signs of community building. We do look for ways that you can incentivize and grow that community to effectively have a big input back into your business. And this is why I love crypto. You're not taking a bunch of money from VCs and deploying it on marketing. Like almost no one uses Google, no one uses Facebook. Like Web 2 marketing is not benefiting much from crypto, outside of maybe some of the centralized businesses like Exchange and others that have, Super Bowl ads. But by and large, you're figuring out how to build and get community to own, a piece of that future, such that they are converted to evangelizing it and supporting that mission. And I think about that as if every bodega or every convenience store was owned partially by the people that live close to it, they'd actually deliver, the same product and potentially a better service than folks like Amazon, who try and roll that all up. And that's sort of pushing the boundaries of, how to think about, the underlying ownership of this infrastructure and creating an unfair advantage for yourself in staying ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So A similar point, I asked Joseph Cooper, founder of Earn Alliance, one of your portfolio companies, the most valuable advice that you've given him. And he said that the communities, companies, token creators of all sort, all desire to effectively distribute their token supply in the most valuable form. What do you mean by that? I actually didn't understand.
Yeah, and I think it sort of ties back into what we were just discussing, which is
Yeah.
how to mobilize, your best customers to be your biggest supporters in this new, social media and information environment. Look, we've seen Twitter take down businesses. When things get when things get picked up, in the crypto sphere, and the information gets propagated, you either have people who are with you or against you. And, being an open source project means you're constantly out there defending your direction and trying to lead a very big community. Think about Vitalik. He's been so credibly neutral on sticking to the facts, on guiding Ethereum's vision from a high level, but also building a massive community. The Ethereum Foundation, every single scalability solution that believes that the EVM could be one of the most powerful virtual machines, looking forward and figuring out how to synergize with that so that they can solve pieces of Ethereum's roadmap, but also tap into its huge community and customer base. And Ethereum did a lot of that, in my mind, because of a very distributed ownership structure from very early on. As one of the first, layer one blockchains, they had a lot of, community ownership, and it started to work. And now those people have built businesses on top of it. So it's that kind of flywheel effect of, how do I spend my most valuable resource, which are either, my tokens or my time, on the right set of people that can deliver very long-term value, not just short-term value. In the, some of the recent hype cycles we've seen around DeFi, around NFTs, it's not that the long-term, ambitions of what a lot of these companies are doing is off. It's that they tried to take shotgun approaches to how to gain attention amidst a very busy environment and noisy place for them to get attention. So that's really, the efficacy of what you want to do with your company's most valuable assets being time and tokens. How do you orient around that, and how do you do it in a data-driven way?
Yeah. And you talk about non-consensus viewpoint, all the time. So how do you develop a non-consensus viewpoint? I think that's very essential if you want to succeed in venture. So it's not just crypto, right? Even if you're targeting a geographical market or a particular technology or an industry, how do you go about doing this?
You're exactly right. Like, the framing of non-consensus, first and foremost, starts with, what is the media pushing? That crypto is dangerous, that it's unregulated, it's not focused on the right problems, or it's not effective in solving the problems that it's set out to, or it's set course to try and tackle. And having a non-consensus viewpoint can sometimes just mean that because you're so deep in something, that a lot of those opinions are wrong. And they're wrong because you have a fact pattern, or you're seeing things in a very different way. And I think that's where, especially around crypto, the media has done a huge disservice to sensationalizing a lot of the components of crypto that may or may not be the most important to its long-term success. That's from the price of Bitcoin to how payment rails are used by bad actors. And one of the beautiful things about crypto is it's open source and it's very transparent. So a lot of those issues, if you go talk to experts and really dig into their validity, just aren't valid, like, in the long term. Like, this system of openness and transparency is actually a much more important change to the market structure than not. Let's compare that for a second with the fad of the day, which is AI, and how important people think AI is going to be.
Yeah.
AI is extremely dangerous in that we're feeding a whole bunch of information into a black box and serving it up to, to different end markets. We're, taking all that IP of, either data or imagery and mixing it up and not giving, sort of the business agreements back to the original creators of that IP. And so on and so forth. So I think that one must, look at crypto and think about what's working versus, this overarching sentiment of what's not working. One of the ways that, we develop conviction around internally, we don't call it non-consensus, but just differentiated thinking, is seeing entrepreneurs who are starting to build in a new direction before it becomes popular. People who have an idea about what the future will hold and are able to extrapolate not only from today, but to look out. And we've had a couple of those along the way. We've seen the development of decentralized finance, which some of the early, thinkers there, perceived major primitives from exchange, things like Uniswap, to borrow lend, things like Aave and Compound, to payments, things like USDC and stablecoins. When NFTs first started, my partner Jake was focused on it from the art, from the aspect of an artist and how it might free them into having potentially more distribution, the ability to monetize, directly without tons of middlemen, and developing, more community around their art in a digital environment. But what we thought there was, okay, that's a hugely generalizable innovation where that stands for everything, for in-game assets, for, different styles of IP that have not gone digital yet, for the ability to unlock being a part of either a community or some other group that you have a ticket to belong to. And so thinking about it in a very general way, kind of led us to believe that NFTs were going to be important before we understood what the term NFT meant, or it was even coined. And focusing early on those big sectors can lead to some of the biggest results. It's hard to argue that with $50 billion of volume, last year, or I guess 21, 22, that NFTs aren't a major innovation that is poised to have a lot of potential. Now, exactly how that comes to bear and who the winners are still needs to get sorted out. But we really need to focus on where we think we can unlock these major new markets or do things differently. It's not that we're trying to take totally novel concepts. It's that we're trying to convert this big transition from a mix of physical and digital data to merging in an economic layer that allows more seamless functionality on the web, and one that can be validated by many, many people and not just one particular platform. And I think that's the power in, sort of the non-consensus thinking, is the ability to be creative and the ability to look forward, not just 1 year, but 5 to 10 years, and think about, if all this happens, then what?
Yeah. So two things, what if someone else also have the same non-consensus viewpoint as you? Then how do you compete? That's one thing. And second thing is that this non-consensus viewpoint that you have need to at some point become a consensus, right? So otherwise, just like Jerry Seinfeld says, a road less traveled is less traveled for a reason. Correct.
I totally agree with both those things. And the first point is, I hope there are some others that have, similar viewpoints to us, because it's hard to market ourselves as a broader ecosystem in space unless, we have some early traction amongst, a subset of people that are pulling in the same direction. So we have a number of peers out in the venture space. We have a number of, portfolio companies that have competitors. And I think that's healthy. That's the early innings of an entirely new mandate and an entirely new remit. And it's building confidence in the viewpoint. So I totally expect to almost never be 100% non-consensus. It's a big world out there. There are many different peoples that are taking different angles on how to approach even a similar viewpoint. And so I encourage that. I think it's healthy, and I think it's very valuable to have people that push you on your approach and to make you uncomfortable that maybe you're not seeing everything that they are, because I think that pushes you to be better. And when you think about founders out there that are trying to, sort of tackle some of these big markets, it can feel very lonely, but that's also, no reason to not pay attention to what's going on around you, because that might drive you to move faster. It might drive you to take a slightly different direction, or it might drive you to become really data driven. Like one thing we don't like is just extreme dogmatism, ways that people believe one thing now and that will never change, forever and ever in the future. We like to think about our non-consensus views also as, not dogmatic. We're constantly trying to react to new data, new evidence, and new thinking that we think is important to, shape it. So, that kind of covers how we think about others that have similar viewpoints, and competing against them is more art than science. Like, we're trying to win over entrepreneurs. We're trying to, prove ourselves that, it's not just about an idea. It's really about the execution and the viability of that idea, and how you can build something big around it.
Yeah. The second thing is like, this leads to your viewpoint, non-consensus viewpoint has to become a consensus viewpoint at some point, right?
Totally agree. And the simplest answer for you is, we have never believed that crypto will be a parallel universe. We've never believed that, we can suck everyone into crypto and build our own, economy that does not have to connect to mainstream. Unlocking mainstream and this intersection of some of the power and potential of what crypto can do, and delivering that, to mainstream is 100%, what needs to happen in order for this to become a really big outcome. What do I mean by that? So the idea of taking bearer assets, whether it's a Bitcoin or, some other form of stablecoin or dollar, or your own data, and making it safe for customers to be in control of that, is a prerequisite to any of this working. Because if people can't figure out how to secure their digital lives, then it's going to be very hard to insert crypto into mainstream. So at least I'm focused a lot on safe adoption, and how, the underlying, sort of ways that people use crypto become safe such that it can achieve mainstream adoption. And there'll be some big help from, security and improving best practices from some of the bigger platforms that handle distribution, from folks like PayPal or Venmo or Square or, Robinhood, and how they sort of teach and educate users about what crypto assets are in the long term. Coinbase's educational portal, all exceptionally important to, what it means for this to become non-consensus in the long term. Because those are where a lot of the roadblocks to adoption from Web 2 or from, larger tech businesses will lie. The idea that this will become consensus is true, but also, there's different time frames for, full consensus and just mainstream adoption. So I don't ever expect, everyone in the world to think that, sort of the crypto as it's labeled today, or cryptocurrencies, need to be a mainstay. But I believe that they must understand the benefits that unlock, some of these features and opportunities, such as, digital twin of certain objects, of, being able to have, digitally native dollars that you can settle 24/7, whether it's, a P2P payment or just a business, reason why you want global transactions, why you want this type of security and, public-private key pairs, to improve your security and privacy, whether you want low, transaction fees, whether you want, validation that some digital service you believe you're paying for is being delivered to you and doesn't have to be, sort of negotiated by a middleman. So I think that all these things, like, if mainstream never understands what crypto really is, that's okay, as long as, this feature set and what's being developed here gets integrated.
Yeah. And, I was just thinking about this. In this conversation, the word I think that you've used the most is conviction. So why are you so convinced about crypto? Why are you all in? I think we've covered a bit of it, but then, what is like the core reason why you believe in this?
The core reason is I think it ultimately focuses technology on benefiting the end user. The orientation of what it means to build a network or a crypto company is if it's not delivering value, to a prospective, consumer-oriented view, it won't survive. And I think what we've seen in kind of Web 2.0 is once you've gained power, once you've gained network effect, you are serving a conflict of interest with your shareholders and your end users. And I think we can redefine that, with crypto networks because they're technology driven. The rules are open. The governance is even distributed and open. And I think the orientation is inevitable that, people will demand the best product at the best price. And crypto is the way to deliver, digital products and services against that framework. And that's what drives, my steadfast conviction in the entrepreneurs in this space who are recognizing that early and building towards that potential.
Yeah, theoretically, I totally believe this. If you look at Amazon as a marketplace, I've figured this very early that only Amazon wins long term. It's not aligned to the sellers. It's probably aligned to the users, but then sellers are screwed. When they gain control, the percentage that they take for the sales, it goes up all the time. And then if it's a product that sells well, they would create a competitor ban and then just kill you. So I know a lot of these Web3 solutions can solve that. But then how do you replace an Airbnb or an Uber or an Amazon? How does that happen? I don't know how the transition is going to happen. That's the only thing that I can't yet visualize, at least.
Yeah, it's and I'm not saying that we're by any means, ready to go out there and compete against a bunch of the consumer-oriented marketplaces. But what you just highlighted is critically important. Amazon sits at the center of all the data, to make the best possible decisions around what they should be in-housing and what they should be reselling. And over time, that has to erode trust. That has to sort of position a bunch of their marketplace participants as, look, the better I do, the higher the probability I'm going to be totally replaced. And they control the visuals, the UI, the UX to promote the products that they want to promote. And it's just very different for Amazon because they are full stack, right? They're actually producing the things all the way up to delivering the distribution and the technology and the logistics around it. So that's, you're putting on the pedestal, definitely one of the hardest, businesses in the world to try and, recreate on top of crypto rails. But some of the other ones you noted, I think it'll happen maybe faster than we think. So, we have a portfolio company called Demo, which is building Nest for cars. Like it's turning cars into a mobility platform where you can, refinance, you can get a mechanic to come, stop by and fix your car. You can buy and sell it much faster because it's validated in terms of, the underlying registrations and titles and everything you need to ultimately, sell your car in an online marketplace, deliver Wi-Fi in your car. Like there are just so many things that it can do, not only collect all the data, from all the customers and help them make more effective purchasing decisions, help OEMs, increase sort of the benefit from improvements to cars over time. And I think a lot of it comes back to one, needing the power to build a huge community, as you noted, and two, to turn a lot of these businesses that are platforms into pure technology, right? So the matching engine, for Uber or Airbnb, can just be a technology, but their moat is in a lot of the different services that they deliver around that. The safe rides, trust and insurance for Airbnb's case, and a lot of that is still nascent, in crypto. So just the matching algorithms, just the marketplace, just the more equitable, less middleman, less cut to a middleman and more to a driver. That stuff can be easily disrupted. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah. And I think such a business would be more profitable as well, right? If you look at Uber and even Amazon, they're not really profitable. And I mean, these marketplaces, there's this common theme that I noticed whenever these marketplaces try to become profitable, they don't deliver as much value as they used to do for the end users. So I, I think Web3 is the way to do this marketplace thing.
I think that, right now it's because it's still a land grab, right? There's still, regions and infrastructure and a lot of things that need to get built and reinvested in, as well as maintaining, a brand, publicly, which is very, very expensive, at the scale that they do it. But it's not that I believe in monopoly long term. I just believe in technology disintermediation. So, like, why do you need Uber, Lyft, and regional players around the world when that's creating, economic inefficiency, for the potential end users? And if they could all build, businesses on top of one network that was at least delivering a number of the underlying core features, such as distribution and settlement of payments and, and adoption of, all the different, marketplace constituents, can you start to chip away at that view? But it has to be because you're delivering it at the same service at a better price. And it has to be that the riders and the users own a significant piece of that business. And we're just not seeing that, yet in kind of corporate finance, but we might in the future. Look, there were early examples of Jet.com trying to figure out how to run massive marketing campaigns and turning their community members. But the regulators have made it very difficult to align the incentives of Uber drivers with the Uber brand or the Uber company. It's very hard to pay people in stock options or micro shares or effectively create that moat that makes them loyal long term. So it's partially a, market structure issue between, considering ownership in a network, a security and a equity interest versus like longer term, maybe blurring those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, this was fun, Alex. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Great questions. I really enjoyed being on with you today. And, I guess my hope is that, these kinds of podcasts can make both CoinFund more accessible, but also, make entrepreneurship more fun and to teach people, about, some of the underlying market opportunities and potential. So it's been great. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.